Hello, so today we are going to be studying Daniel chapter 3, which is about the three Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they will not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's image. Chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces, to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud to you it is Then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Now I want to stop there real quick. And I want to point out that Nebuchadnezzar is a type of the Antichrist in the end times. And look at what it says. It says in verse 4, Then an herald cried out, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages. This is a type of the Antichrist over a one world religion and a one world rule. And notice it says nations. In this time, God will go back to dealing with the nation of Israel, and the Antichrist, in the time of Jacob's trouble, will be trying to devour Jacob or Israel. But God says that all Israel shall be saved at that time. So this is a type of that time period. And instead of just worshiping Nebuchadnezzar's image, what they'll be doing in the last days is taking the mark of the beast and the image in his number. So the name, the number, and the mark. So this is a type of that time period. Verse 7. Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, the languages, fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And I think it's interesting how in verse 7, it's the second time it points out all kinds of music. So this image that Nebuchadnezzar has that he wants the whole world to bow down to, it's connected to music. So I wonder if in the last times or in the last days, when the Antichrist is reigning on earth, if somehow it'll be connected to music. Because this is the second time it says all kinds of music. Verse 8. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Now the answer to that is Jesus Christ, of course. And before we go back into verse 16, I just want to point out, when the Lord showed me that the King James Bible was his word, he showed me that in this chapter, and at that time I was reading an NIV, and I realized that the type of Jesus Christ, when what we're about to get into, Jesus Christ protecting Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it changes the verse, and I'm going to expound on that when we get there. 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Notice their attitude right here. It says, if it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. That's that type of attitude that we should have every day. We should understand that in our trials and tribulations, that God will deliver us up. But even if he doesn't, we should still do the right thing and follow him. And that's the attitude that they had, and that's the attitude that we should have. Verse 19, Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the people that threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the burning fiery furnace, those men died when they turned up the furnace. That's how hot it was. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the capital S, Son of God. This is the verse that Jesus Christ showed me that the King James Bible was the Word of God, and that other versions are perversions. And if you compare this verse from the King James Bible to the NIV, or basically any new version, the King James says, and the form of the 4th is like the capital S, Son of God. In new versions, it says, in the form of the 4th was like the lowercase s, sons of the gods. Lowercase s, lowercase g, gods. Well, if you say the 4th is like the sons of gods, that's lowercase s and lowercase g. That's talking about a devil. So it's interesting how new versions will take the type of Jesus Christ right here, and it was Jesus Christ that was protecting the 3 Hebrew children here. It was the pre-incarnate Christ in the Old Testament right here in the burning fiery furnace that was protecting them. Who would want to take the glory of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, literally, verse 25, Son of God, and give it to a devil? That's really interesting. Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So it's really interesting how new versions of the Bible want to take away the glory of Jesus Christ in this chapter and give it to a devil. I also want to point out the fact that whenever you see the Most High God in the Bible, it's usually a Jew speaking to Gentiles, or it's a Gentile speaking about the Jewish God, which is the true God, which is Jehovah, which is Jesus. And the reason why the Gentiles would often refer to this God as the Most High God is because Gentiles would serve many gods. They were polytheists. They worshipped many gods. It doesn't matter how many gods that they served or whatever, but to distinguish the true God from their gods, what they would say is, oh, the Jewish God is the Most High God, time and time again, to make a difference between the Jewish God and their false gods that they worshipped. So time and time again throughout the Bible, you'll see a Gentile referring to God as the Most High God. And that's because Gentiles throughout time would worship many gods. And sometimes it would be a Gentile referring to God, or it would be a Jew that would say the Most High God, because that Jew was speaking to Gentiles or speaking to the church, which is made up of neither Jew or Gentile, just to distinguish the Most High God from all the other false gods of the polytheists. So that's just an interesting thing if you want to go through the Bible and see that. And that's why they say the Most High God, because it's to distinguish the true God from all the false gods. I also want to point out, it's interesting in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel had interpreted a dream. He had told Nebuchadnezzar what the dream was and then interpreted it for him through the power of God. And he did this when all the magicians and the sorcerers and the wise men of Babylon couldn't. And when he did this, it's interesting in verse 46, chapter 2, verse 46, it says, Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. Now, we are not to let anybody worship us. As a matter of fact, Peter didn't allow anybody to worship him. Paul in Acts 14 didn't allow anybody to worship him. The angel in Revelation 22, 8 through 9 didn't allow anybody to worship him. But Daniel allowed Nebuchadnezzar to worship him. And Daniel would later pay for this. And when we get to our Daniel study, the book of Daniel, and we start studying that, I'll expound more upon that. But it is interesting how Nebuchadnezzar would worship Daniel, and then right there in the next chapter, chapter 3, the one that we just read, Nebuchadnezzar is commanding the Jews to worship his image. And so when the Jews, the 3 Hebrew children, refused to worship the image, Nebuchadnezzar was probably thinking, well, I bowed down to Daniel, I worship Daniel, why won't you worship my image? And so whenever I see this chapter, the biggest thing I see is how it's going to be during the last time when God goes back to dealing with the nation of Israel and the Antichrist sets up his image in the whole world. Because you'll notice again and again in this chapter, it says the nations, the nations, the nations. The whole world will be believing a lie and worshiping the Antichrist in his image. And so when I read this chapter, that's what I see again and again. And I just think it's interesting how again and again it's connected to music. And so that's something that is something that I want to look into, and I personally want to study more. And I often think about, is the Antichrist image in the last days, is that going to be is that going to be connected to music somehow? Because it said 3 or 4 times all kinds of music in that chapter. And it was directly connected to the image and connected to the nations. And we know when we study the Tower of Babel, everybody spoke the same language. Well, music is one language that everybody understands. It doesn't matter what language somebody speaks. If you turn on a song, the person will understand what that music is trying to convey. So it's kind of interesting how this image that Nebuchadnezzar sets up is all tied into music again and again and again. And we know that Satan, when he was created with musical pipes. And there was all types of music in Satan, in Lucifer. And he was created in perfect wisdom and beauty. So I think that's interesting, and I wonder how that's going to play in the last days, and if music will be tied into taking the mark of the beast somehow. But anyway, that's just a thought, and we will continue our verse-by-verse Bible study in the book of Matthew in the next week or so. I have a live stream coming up about Israel in the last days and how God will go back to dealing with Israel. But after I finish my verse-by-verse Bible study through the book of Matthew, I will probably do the book of Daniel next. I'm actually studying it myself right now, and we'll do a verse-by-verse Bible study on the book of Daniel. It's only 12 chapters, because the more I'm reading the book of Daniel, the more I'm realizing how much it's really tied into the book of Revelation in the last days. And I'll stop there, but I think that's a good place to stop. But it is interesting. You should look up times and seasons in the Bible and see what it's connected to. It shows up 3 times, times and seasons. And I'll get more into that when we get to our verse-by-verse Bible study in the book of Daniel. But it's always talking about the last days. Hello, so today we are going to be studying Daniel chapter 3, which is